Believe it or not, I'm genuinely excited to tell you about all the movies that Prime Video just added. I've been recommending movies on Prime Video for years now, and I've never seen them dump this many top-notch movies in one time, and there's a bunch to go through on this list. This video is sponsored by Scentbird, but I'll tell you more about them later in the video. Right now, I want to tell you about some of my top recommendations of the month, which include movies like Wicker Park. This is actually a lesser-known thriller that stars Josh Hartnett. It came out around 2004 and is actually from the same director as Lucky Number 11. Now, it's not as funky and cool as Lucky Number 11. It's actually kind of a sexy thriller, but it's got plenty of twists and turns. It's very interesting. I'm honestly surprised this wasn't more of a hit when it came out. I could say the same thing about my next pick, Last Man Standing, one of the coolest and most underrated movies Bruce Willis has ever done. This is a Prohibition-era Western that takes place in this old town and kind of pits the Italian mob against the Irish mob. It's actually an adaptation of Akira Kurosawa's samurai film, Yojimbo, and it's actually not the only American Western based on that movie. Lots of shooting. I don't know that Bruce Willis ever reloads in this movie. If he does, it's nowhere near to close enough, but it's still a really cool Western with just a lot of blood and bullets, and by the way, Christopher Walken playing just a dynamite bad guy. Another terribly underrated thriller is The Limey. This is actually one of Steven Soderbergh's first films, and he was a dynamite director right out of the gate.
This little guy locking up a car, and it was so unmarked. It was marked. I mean, it was just marked.
In this movie, legendary Terrence Stamp plays this real rugged Englishman that goes to LA to track down people he believes killed his daughter. The only problem is he's getting older and he's beginning to have signs of dementia, and the film is actually edited in a way where it's hard to tell exactly what's going on. Not in a way that completely loses the viewer, but the main character doesn't have all of his wits about him, and the movie does a great job at taking some away from the viewer. It's clever, sharp stuff. If you like English gangster movies, The Limey isn't one, but I can guarantee it'll be right up your alley. Black Rain is a longtime favorite of mine, and it's not the only Ridley Scott movie on this list, but it's one of the cooler movies he made following Blade Runner. And the aesthetic of this movie has a little bit in common with Blade Runner. You follow a couple of New York cops, played by Michael Douglas and Andy Garcia, that arrest a Yakuza member, and then when he's extradited back to Japan, they go with him, and they get swept up into sort of a Yakuza case. Very fish out of water stuff. Cool stuff, and it's even got a little bit of action in there as well. Same goes for Marathon Man, a classic thriller starring Dustin Hoffman. If you're a fan of his in any kind of way and you somehow missed this classic, it's easily one of the better movies he's ever been in. And that's not it. They've got amazing movies like No Country for Old Men, which never gets old no matter how many times I see it. Gladiator, it's a great time to watch that. There's a sequel that Ridley Scott is currently working on. And Saving Private Ryan, which I actually have an itch to watch after recently watching The Fabelmans. In that movie, you see a young Steven Spielberg making early sort of World War II movies as a teenager. So I've got the bug to go back and revisit Saving Private Ryan, which is still to this day easily one of the best movies ever made depicting battle in World War II. But if that's not enough action for you, they've also got movies like Battle Los Angeles, which is a little mindless but still pretty badass. Battleship, which is basically the same type of movie. Those would make a great double feature. In fact, I would have a hard time picking between the two. Kick-Ass, which is again just always fun, and even though it's not a Nicolas Cage movie, his role in it really helps set that movie over the top. And then, believe it or not, I recommended Rampage with The Rock. This is a fun movie based on a silly video game, and the movie is very self-aware, just like some of those other action movies. It's not top-tier stuff, but it is a wild, fun watch that I do recommend. Something else I strongly recommend is today's sponsor, Scentbird. And that's because Scentbird is a subscription service that will send brand new perfume and cologne scents to you in little vials like this one. Now when you get it, you'll actually get one of these little magnetic cases that just pop right open, and then every month they'll send you a new vial that has about 100 sprays in it. And I can attest, I've used several of these. There's a lot in one of these, again, for a fairly low price. This one is titled I Don't Know What by D.S. Durga. a brand I've never heard of, and honestly, a scent I probably wouldn't have went for right off the shelf. Each one comes with this great little card with a write-up and a description, but more importantly, you get a good chance to try a fragrance without spending a ton of money on it. And then this one from Sweet Taboo is called Chris Collins, another one I probably never would have tried out, but it's got coffee and vanilla touches in it, and it's really kind of nice, and again, unlike anything I would have worn, but even right now, it's got a smell that's probably gonna make me a little hungry. And if you go to your local mall right now and try to purchase a small amount, it's gonna cost at least $30, and odds are, you're not gonna find I Don't Know What by D.S. Durga in your mall. Or a lot of the other ones on Scentbird for that matter. But Scentbird lets you pick from a new designer fragrance every month for just $17. In addition to that great price, when you go to scentbird.com, that link is in the description, and use my code CONNECTION, you're gonna save 55% off your first month with Scentbird. So that ends up being about $7 for 100 sprays of what could be your new favorite fragrance. And they don't just have indie labels either. They've got big name brands like Prada, Gucci, Versace, and a big bottle from one of those companies can go for hundreds of dollars, making this a really smart way to go about finding one. So if you want to start smelling better, just go to that link in the description or go to scentbird.com, use my code CONNECTION to save 55%. But speaking of great stuff, let's talk about the rest of the movies on this list, which also includes one of the absolute best low-budget thrillers I've ever seen. It's titled The Guilty. Now, this movie is from Denmark, but they did make an American remake on Netflix starring Jake Gyllenhaal, a movie that's not nearly as good as the original. This is a real nail-biter of a movie where you're following one emergency call operator who takes a very chilling phone call and gets sucked into a wild story. You never leave the call center, and this movie will keep you on the edge of your seat. My next pick is another multi-language film that actually depicts a true life adventure. It's titled TIKI. This is the true story of Thor Heyerdahl, who actually took a balsa wood raft all the way across the Pacific Ocean in the 1950s. It's an insane true story and a beautiful, just absolutely stunning movie. There are some jaw-dropping moments in this, and it depicts the true story quite well. This has really been one of my favorite little indie movies for quite a while. If you've yet to see it, this is top-notch stuff. I'm telling you, this is a killer month, and this movie is just one of the best that they've added. The Devil's Double is a real violent one. This actually stars Dominic Cooper and Dominic Cooper as one of Saddam Hussein's sons, one of the more vicious ones, and they were all pretty terrible, and Dominic Cooper also plays his double. So not only is this a true story, even though they do embellish quite a bit, this kind of has a Prince and the Pauper type of a setup, and Dominic Cooper kills it. He does an amazing job playing both characters, especially playing this double who's really being torn apart by these two different lives that he's living. It's really great stuff. It's got a killer soundtrack, a cool look, great performances, and it's really just kind of a wild story. Fair warning, there's some really upsetting stuff. If you don't know, Saddam Hussein's sons were absolute animals, and this movie doesn't really hold back on that stuff either. All the way back from 1967, still one of my all-time favorite movies. No matter how many times I've seen it, it's got to be Cool Hand Luke. Almost every single scene in this movie is not only classic, it's so enjoyable the first time you see it or the 50th time. Everything from the egg-eating contest to the multiple escapes to, my goodness, watching prisoners pave a road. It's all done in an amazing way in this movie, and it's not just Paul Newman's performance. Every thread of this movie is just absolutely fantastic, all the way down to the cinematography. It's surprisingly beautiful in this prison movie, and I'd have to even go out on a limb and say that Cool Hand Luke might actually be my favorite prison movie of all time, which is really saying something because there's been some killer ones, including some other ones added to Prime Video, movies like Shawshank Redemption.
Lord, it's a miracle! Man up and vanished like a fart in the wind.
The movie most people would probably say is their favorite. I just, saw it 50 times on TBS when I was a kid, to the point of maybe wearing it out. They've also got Scarface, another movie that feels a little worn out to me, but if it's been a while since you've seen it, it's still top-notch Brian De Palma. But a Brian De Palma movie I like even more has got to be The Untouchables.
There is violence in Chicago, of course, but not by me and not by anybody I employ, and I'll tell you why, because it's not good business.
I've loved this one forever. It's a really cool Prohibition-era flick. Al Capone, played by Robert De Niro, what's not to like? And then you've just got amazing sequences in this one as well. This is another one that, yeah, it feels a little old-fashioned today, but it's held up surprisingly well. And I mean, there were so many on this list. Those were my favorites, but they've also got The Fighter, True Grit, the original with John Wayne, easily my favorite.
Now it's a rat rib for a rat. And this is lawful service of same. See? Doesn't pay any attention to me.
They've got the new A Star is Born, which I think is just a top-notch movie. Flags of Our Fathers, The King's Speech, and they've even got the classic movie Gaslight. I'm sure you've heard the phrase gaslighting. It gets used way too much nowadays, but the meaning of that term actually comes directly from this movie. If horror is your thing, then I recommend The Eyes of My Mother, but I don't recommend this one for everyone. This is actually art house horror. If you're looking for just wild over-the-top stuff, The Eyes of My Mother is very slow-paced, very patient, yet it's kind of got themes in common with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but everything's taken from a drastically different point of view, and it makes all the difference, making this a deeply disturbing movie that actually has kind of some bizarrely tender moments in it. It's weird. But for a low-budget, just kind of classic found footage style horror movie, Hell House LLC comes back to Prime Video. This is one I've recommended for a long time. This is going to make a great Halloween watch. If you don't want to wait for Halloween though, and you like found footage stuff, this is easily one of the best done in the last 10 years or so. And then A Quiet Place 2 comes back to Prime. It was actually on Prime not long after it came out in theaters, but I think that this franchise is just top-notch stuff, especially for PG-13 horror. I mean, both movies remind me of like early M. Night Shyamalan when he was still making good movies. Both of these feel like that. I feel like they're fairly well crafted and just kind of revolve around an interesting thing, even though it's incredibly far-fetched to think that anyone could survive against these aliens. You know, it's one fart and you're toast. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, longtime favorite of mine. It's been on a bunch of Netflix lists on this channel over the years. It just left Netflix. It goes right over to Prime Video because that's how good movies typically do. If you ask me which Will Ferrell movie I've laughed more during, I gotta say, it's gonna be a toss-up between Step Brothers and The Other Guys, and The Other Guys is coming to Prime, and I consider it to be highly underrated, even for Will Ferrell fans. I mean, not only is Mark Wahlberg funny, but you've got Samuel L. Jackson and The Rock in this.
Thank you.
And we do it again and again.
Hey, you shut your face! If we want to hear you talk, I will shove my arm up your ass and work your mouth like a puppet.
I mean, Eva Mendes, that scene alone is funnier than most things in movies today. So if you need some laughs, I can't recommend that movie enough. And then MOUSEHUNT is a fantastic family movie directed by Gore Verbinski. It's easily one of the most visually stunning family-friendly movies of its kind. I mean, top-notch cinematography and visual effects throughout the entire thing, plus just good classic old-fashioned humor. But they've also got Legally Blonde, Valley Girl, an early Nicolas Cage movie, and the entire Men in Black trilogy. Speaking of M. Night Shyamalan though, later in the month it's worth noting his new movie, Knock at the Cabin, is getting added to Prime. However, I was not a fan of this one. M. Night kind of has a trajectory where he makes some good movies and then they just go downhill, and right now it feels like we're on a pretty steep downward slope with Shyamalan. But if you ask me, that is a pretty killer list. Thanks again to Scentbird for sponsoring another video. Don't forget to use my code FLICK55 when you check out at Scentbird, and I will keep making these episodes as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special Prime episode, and you will see me on the next one.